What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we got round two with Of Virtue. It is great to be able to talk with you, Damon. Thanks for coming back on the show today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, anytime,
Had some
man.
fun.
Yeah, the last interview we did was really fun, and it was really good to be able to talk with you because now we got the new full length album Omen coming out. For people who haven't heard this full album yet, because this album is absolutely kick ass, but do you feel like the first singles that we heard so far, such as Cannibals or Anxiety, Cut Me Open, or Sober, is like a good representation of this whole album, or is that just one little taste of what's to come?
Oh, it's definitely a little bit of a taste. Like it's such an interesting record to me, like top to bottom, like just from all the singles that are released, where it's like that's kind of what I'm like the most excited about is for people to be able to sit there and go from track one and just go all the way through, kind of run the gamut of dynamics, the emotions, the storytelling, and everything else. Where there's everything from the heavy stuff to the lighter stuff all woven together, and it's like it all makes it make sense. Like even for me, where I hadn't listened to it in a while, I sat down the other day, just popped it on, and I was like, you know what? It kind of makes you smile. It just
That's not
feel like a
metal.
proud parent.
That's not metal. No, I'm kidding. But the last time I spoke to you, we were discussing the Sinner EP, which was also really, really good. And I asked, like last time, if the Sinner EP was meant to kind of serve as sort of like the bridge between what defines you and now. Was that sort of the case with it, or has the idea of what Sinner is in relation to this completely different?
Um, it's a little bit of both because there are songs from that EP that are going to be on this full length, but it was kind of a sense of like we wanted to test the waters a little bit with pushing the sound, figuring out where we could go with it, and ultimately by releasing stuff the way that we did, where it was predominantly just singles based, it's like we could kind of gauge where we wanted to go with the record as things were going, and it's not like we just had you know 10 songs or 11 songs, 12 songs ready to go. Even last year it was a matter of like we were still kind of figuring out kind of how we wanted to move, and it was like as we were putting stuff out, it's like we just kept writing, we kept going back and forth into the studio to where we could take all that information and then kind of craft as we went along, which is, I would say, it's kind of a first. It's kind of similar to what we did with What Defines You as well. The only difference being we weren't able to play some of these songs live before, they quote unquote were going to make the record like last time. Whereas like with What Defines You, we recorded that in three different sessions, but each time there was a big chunk of touring like in between the songs. Whereas this was like, all right, we're kind of taking a leap of faith here with some of these, and some of it could be good, some of it could be bad. We haven't seen too much bad so far, so
Yeah. Well, so is it fair to say that maybe like the vision of what this was supposed to be kind of like changed a lot over a span of time in a way, or was there sort of like a consistent momentum throughout the entirety of the making of it?
I'd say it was pretty consistent. Like again, the goal. Do we know what it was from the get go? Not necessarily, but it was just a matter of all right, we're just gonna kind of write and see what happens. Experiment a little more, see what strengths we can tailor ourselves to, and over time, like we've always kind of have like the same basic message. Just how we were gonna get there, I mean, we're gonna be honest. I didn't really know. We didn't really know, but that was kind of the fun about it. Is it felt exciting. It felt cool to just get into a room, not have any preconceived ideas about what we wanted to write, and see what we could come up with. And I mean, shit, dude.
Yeah.
Sorry for cursing, but it's like, you know, we got 12 songs where everybody kind of looks at it and goes, I think we did it. I think, at least for now, because the job is never really like done. You just kind of have to like have somebody forcibly remove it from your hands,
Yeah, of
and then
course.
you just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I remember
But
stumping you both of you last time on how do you know when a song is finished. But here's a brand new question. I've never asked this question before, so you're the first, the guinea pig of this question, if I might say. But when it comes to making a song, you know, every artist goes through this where you're making a song and you scrap it. I mean, there's plenty of times where you have an idea, it's not really flowing through, and you kind of like ditch the idea. How far along do you have to be within a song to know if you keep it or you scrap it?
Ooh, um, I can at least say from this process and kind of how we chose to maneuver with this. Once we got through, I'd say like a chorus, we wrote like a chorus and maybe like a main riff of some kind. And if you weren't feeling it after like those two, sections of the song, we would move on pretty quickly. So it's like you kind of know if you have something there at that point. Um, Try not to bang your head against the wall too much. Like there's only a couple songs where, maybe it took a little bit longer than what we expected. I know Cold Blooded was kind of like that from our like the last EP, but it's also gonna be on the record where, we kind of sat there for about 4 hours, didn't really know what we were doing at first.
Mhm.
Went and got some lunch, just kind of had a conversation, came back. Funny enough, actually put on some EDM and we were just kind of listening to that. And then all of a sudden, picked up a guitar, started noodling around like what was going to be the main riff. And then from there, it was like, oh, okay, we know where we're going. But for the most part, it's like if we couldn't come up with that sticking melody, just humming something out or having that like big riff to center the song around, we would just go on to the next thing. So it was a pretty, you know, don't get hung up on anything that is, it could be cool, but if it's not it, just keep it moving.
And I feel like Of Virtue has demonstrated a lot of evolution over the years. When you compare the Omen to What Defines You to even like Salvation from 2015, and like going way further back. So this is another like debate I like to have, where like, do you believe evolution, that the way an artist evolves, do you believe that is something you necessarily have control over? Can you dictate your own evolution in a way, or do you kind of have to let evolution sort of happen naturally?
I think both can happen. The natural part is just living. It's a byproduct of just what your daily experiences are, what you're going through. You're gonna get older, your tastes might change, you might want to dabble in something else, you might not like some things as much as you used to in your formative or younger years, and how you can accelerate that or at least have control over it, the way that you phrased it, is by being curious, by exploring those cravings, or just the if you want something, if you like acoustic rock, or if you like this, jam it out, check it out, let's see if that fits into what the next phase is going to be. Or you just kind of write these little quips or little pieces. And this, there'll be sometimes, there's a couple riffs on this record where it's like, I always talk about writing ahead, and it's kind of like on accident, really. You might write a riff or a section or a thing that at the time it's actually a little bit over your skis. You don't know how to use the part properly. But then sometimes you'll go back when you get stumped, you'll go into the library, or I'll go into my phone. And if I were to show you my like screen record on my phone of ideas that are unlabeled and messy and from like 3 or 4 years ago, I'm like, oh, that's sick. I just didn't know what to do with it at the time, but it was one of those where, you capture it, you can look back and go, okay, I know how to process it now because I'm just looking at life differently. It's not just through the lens of let me be heavy, or let me be fast, or let me be like this thing that I may have thought we needed to be at the time. So yeah, you do have control over it, but at the same time, I think it's just if you let life happen on life's terms, and again, don't feel so preoccupied with trying to be a thing, then that's honestly the way that you can control it, is to not worry about being in as much control. So
Well, here's another question I've been liking to ask guitar players. Do you think we will ever run out of riffs? Ever? Because a lot of people tell me that a song starts off with a riff. I hear it for rock bands, for death metal bands, for black metal bands, for doom bands, for pop punk bands. I've heard it for all genres in a way. So, is there ever a time where we'll just run out of riffs? Every chord progression, every string has been used.
No, no. There's never a time to run out of riff, man, because anything can be a riff, and it also depends too on just what genre you're in or what style you're seeking to play. Because again, a riff could just be something simple. It could be a three-note chord progression. It could be one note, but just keeping that rhythm super tight. So again, if you're open-minded and depending on what you're trying to do, there's never a shortage. You can take the same riff, play that thing in E standard, put it in E below E, put it in drop D. It's going to sound different, even just with the slightest change.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be somebody that, maybe they want it a little bit more technical, but then there's going to be the people that they want to keep it simple. So, yeah, there's no way. The riff is it's infinite. The riff is that should be a T-shirt right there.
Yeah,
the riff is infinite.
The riff, dude. Write that down right now, and whoever's doing your merch, write that down, or I'm gonna steal it. Just letting you know. I'll give you a week to trademark that.
There you go.
But and too as well, like being that so many guitars now have like 80 strings on them or something like that. Seeing what a lot of these tech bands do. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever run out of riffs. The solution, if we're running out of riffs, just add a couple extra strings to the guitar, right?
Hey, there you go. At some point in time, we're just gonna be playing harps.
I was just thinking the same thing. Every rock star's gonna be a harp player. With those big ass guitar necks and everything like that, I would just take the strings off and use it as like an ironing board.
Well, they might lose me, but I just need a nice little 6-string, maybe a 7-string every now and then to do something crazy. I don't got big hands either. I got small little dainty hands.
Some of those gen players, I swear they're lumberjacks in their spare time. But I've always thought that Of Virtue has a very eclectic guitar tone as well, especially because there's many different usages of vocals and many different usages of rhythm as well. So do you almost maybe like adjust your technique or maybe like adjust your style to either fit the vocal pattern better or to maybe go along with the rhythm a little bit more, or does the band kind of like maybe write around the riff in a way and kind of accommodates to that?
It depends. I would say for this record more specifically, the riff, I don't want to say it was more secondary, but it would, it's more wrapped around the vocal than anything else. So it's like there will be times where we might have had a sick riff, but you also have a sick vocal, but that they kind of don't go together. And for us, it was a conscious choice to go, okay, well, what's going to be the thing that usually people are going to gravitate to? And in the past, we might have chosen the riff or been like, all right, we're going to kind of accommodate this more to be more of like a guitar-driven band. But Omen specifically, on a lot of songs, we were able to accommodate both. Or if one needed to kind of give way to the other, then we would just wrap around the vocal and go from there, because we found that, like, at least for us in bands that we listened to growing up, we associate, obviously you have Linkin Park, you'll have Korn, you'll have Slipknot, and like they have riffs. But for as heavy as they are, they actually still are fairly pop sensible with how they deliver everything. The vocal is up front. It's the most human thing that you're going to hear. And then you have this backbone that comes in and takes over some of the heaviness, and the catchiness, instead of it just being like an all-out assault all the time. Now we have a couple songs that are like that, like Anxiety. There's a track, like one of the tracks we put out is pretty nasty, and that one's pretty centered around riffs. But then you'll have something like, Sober, or you'll have something like Sinner, where it's like there might be less traditional riffing in the song, but even in that case, it's like you go through and listen to it, and you're like, oh, there's some cool little things going on here. It's just we decided to put them to the background a little bit.
But with like your many different sounds as well, like maybe a riff may not sound good through one effect, but then maybe you plug a different pedal in or change the amp setting, and then it's a completely different context or meaning altogether, right?
Oh, absolutely. you could have something even just putting a little, a little high pass on there, a little telephone, a little delay. There's been plenty. I mean, dude, we'll take phasers, anything else, and just see what we can do. Like if it's just a basic riff or something like that, try to spice it up and see if you can't give it another life. One of my favorite effects that we wound up using is a Neural Gojira plugin that we're just like, you know what, let me just see how many things I can stick an octave on real fast and see what it can do. And it's like, it can make some stuff sound really mean. Like the intro riff in Cold Blooded, like it's pretty heavy. It's already in drop G, but we're like, why not? Just stick that octaver on there, throw a little flanger, a little delay, and it just makes it wide, huge, and gives it a whole just different vibe and just meaning. It's like, ugh.
I don't
And
think
that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think I found a single guitar player though who doesn't have an MXR phase pedal. Like I've always seen that orange pedal on every single pedal board I've ever seen. Are you a proud owner of one of those too?
I used to be the Phase 90.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've never had like an original. I've always only found the clones, and I used to get irritated at them because man, it's like I would love to be able to like really like set the depth rate a little bit more instead of just being like they're just on. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's a tone. And I'm like, I'd like to dial it back a little bit. Well, one phase that I've always enjoyed myself was using the Strymon Mobius
Okay.
for modulation, and on there it's like I can set the depth rate a little more shallow, get me a bit more of the dry signal blended in there, so I can do some cool things. And honestly, that's probably the coolest trifecta of pedals to go on like a little nerd tangent that I've ever owned were the Timeline, the Big Sky, and the Mobius combination from Strymon. Shout out, just give me the pedals again. Thank you. But they have so many cool, like there's a sweeper delay preset on the Timeline, which is kind of sick because you can set two different delays. You can have them in stereo and ping pong them. So you can have one at cut time, one you stick it still with quarter notes, and then you're incorporating a very slow, maybe zero point 0.8 or even like a dotted eighth with the sweep coming in, and it's like you could do some crazy stuff. Like our song, it's an older song. It's called "Suffer." From What Defines You, it's kind of like an example of this, where it's like this very low, ominous, kind of like brooding filter that bubbles up, and it keeps doing this the entire time. Most people aren't going to notice that kind of stuff, but it's kind of something that takes like a routine, just like chromatic riff, and when you hear it build and build and build, you start putting more of this industrial texture behind it. It's like all that comes from just plugging in a couple pedals, playing guitar, and being like, all right, I've just built this landscape. Now where am I going to take it with the vocals?
And you bring such like a good point too, because some people, and I've heard it a lot less now, but I used to hear like, oh, if you're relying on all these different pedals, that's just because you don't have the technical like thing. I'm like, to make a bunch of pedals work very good. Like look at what Tom Morello was able to accomplish, and like you look at like knowing how to set up your pedals, knowing what settings to use. I mean, there's millions of different sounds you could get from just three pedals alone, and like knowing how that works is all in a skill in of itself.
Absolutely. And in some ways, man, it's just like anything else, it's creativity. Like Tom Morello is a great example because not only does he has a great mind for effects, but he also has a great template of just how with just his hands, he writes very catchy riffs.
Yeah.
So that when he does incorporate an effect, it just enhances it, and it's going to give so much more body to whoever is going, if it's Zach De La Rocha or if it, is Chris Cornell, whoever it was. Like, he obviously had great singers that could complement and take what he was doing to the next level. But it's like he had that great foundation to begin with of like, yes, if we want to be purists, you should have a solid, your two hands. Be able to get me 80% there most of the time. And then from there, do whatever you want, man. There's guitar players. I read one with Omar from Mars Volta, and he's like, I hate kind of playing traditional guitar. I like using effects so that I can kind of create these otherworldly sounding, landscapes. And I was like, when I first started playing guitar, I was like, I like that because I kind of sucked, and it was just like, well, pedals are fun, and they allow me a way to sound kind of better than I am, at least at that specific time. So
I've always said
there's
that.
just it's,
Oh, you were saying?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, I was yeah.
I was just gonna say they should do a Bob Ross parody show, but instead of like the joy of painting, it's like the joy of pedals, and be like, it's your world. If you want to put a little phase shifter on there, a little delay, we're gonna put some happy little distortion on there too. Like it's your world, and every distortion pedal needs a friend. So we're gonna bring back the metal zone too.
Oh boy, just have everything sound like in tune.
Well, the Metal Zone, I saw a really funny parody, and huge shout out to Boss because they make awesome pedals. But somebody was did a parody video where they took a guitar store hostage and be like, "You all do what I say, or I'm gonna go full strum on this Metal Zone." And all the staff,
Hooks up like five of them together.
yeah, and the staff was like, "No, don't do it, don't do it." So.
Oh my god, and that's a sound too. That's like if you know a metal zone or even like just the traditional like Boss overdrive distortions like from back in the day, you're like they can be a little traumatizing every now and then, but
Yeah, that's metal,
or
right?
the insane setting on the Line 6, if anybody remembers that one.
Oh, the Spider 3. You set it to the
Yeah,
Rose of Sharon by Killswitch Engage setting, and there you go.
just buzz. I was like, all right, well, at least I can play these kind of riffs.
Oh, God. You're bringing back bad memories of when I used to work on a guitar floor. I'm going to have to go to therapy after this one. And I just have a few more questions left for you. But being that you also contribute vocally to the band as well with your lead singer, do both of you kind of need to be in the same headspace on an emotional level when singing and harmonizing together to make it sound like your parts belong? Or does it help if you does it maybe like add contrast if maybe you're both kind of like in your own individual worlds?
Um, no, we're usually when we're singing together on songs or just like working together, we can kind of tell who is going to take the lead on certain things and be like, okay, let me figure out and let me ask the right questions to see why, Tyler is doing this or why he's writing this or feeling this so that I can get into that space as well and understand where he's coming from. Because as much as it is like if we were on different pages like we have been in the past, I don't feel like we maximized, what we could have done maybe to our best degree. And that was something that was a conscious effort where it's okay, instead of it just being like your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, or like doing the traditional like, oh, okay, you have like your screamer and then your guitar guy does some quote unquote backups or whatever. It's like, no, if there's a song that calls for Tyler to just dominate the entire thing and me to play more of a background role, and that works for me, I'll take it and let him do his thing. If it's one of those where he's like, hey, I need you to, do this because this song requires more of your style. I'm like, okay. But then from there, it's like, we'll kind of concede, the viewpoint, or you just simply go, hey, he's written parts for me where I'm like, oh, that's sick. And he's like, yeah, just go nail it. And I'm like, I got you.
Definitely. You guys work very well together too. Like, because I feel like everybody in Of Virtue has their own individual talents. I love the crisp sound of the drums, the way that the bass moves around, the different guitar tones and the vocals. You all work very well separately, but when you put yourselves together, you have an awesome combination. So it definitely is prevalent on Omen, I must say.
Hey, thank you. And again, that was the main thing from just, from COVID, from being not really playing as many shows, but the one thing in the songwriting that we have noticed and hopefully other people take away from it as well was like just kind of rediscovering the love of being in a room together, no preconceived ideas, and no one coming in there and just being like, hey, I have this fully formed thing and you guys just it's like, no, we wrote every song from the ground up together, just kind of old school. It's like when you would show up to your friend's house with the guitar in a backpack and an amp, and you might write something, you might just hang out. and get drunk. You never know.
Yeah, fair enough.
But this one though was one where we kind of wanted to rediscover. I don't want to say like how and why we got into music, but it was a scary time, and because of that, it kind of put a healthy fear in us to be like, you know what? Not that we were holding back before, but let's just keep digging as far as we can. There's going to be some uncomfortable moments. There was definitely some tense moments, whether it be in the studio or phone calls or whatever it was concerning the direction or what we were doing. But it all came from a place of everyone had, skin in it. There was no person that's like, oh, nobody's just getting the A on the group project, showing up, putting your parts together. No, we're all in here, we're all cooking, we're all tasting it, and the final product reflects that.
Definitely. I could definitely say so. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Most of all, thank you for this epic album. Is there just anything else with Virtue you'd like to promote with the release of Omen in terms of upcoming shows? What else we could be expecting? I hope Virtue's coming to New York somewhere in there.
We are sometime in the fall. I'll let you know when for sure.
When I turn this,
in the meantime,
when I turn this audio off, you're telling me.
That I can do. We're getting ready. We actually leave next week. We're going back to Europe with Being as an Ocean and a band called Senna. We'll be there for a month. We're playing Summer Breeze in Germany to start that off. We have a pair of album release shows in October. October 6th, we are playing in Detroit, Michigan. October 7th, our hometown venue, we have a new one called Greywall Hall in Lansing. So that'll be our proper album release back at home. And then beyond that, just keep an eye out on our socials. Like I said, we're all Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere, YouTube, Discord, Twitch. You can find us anywhere.
Does every member have like a social media account that you all individually handle, or do you just put one social media and one member in charge of all the social media?
It can range. There's a lot of times where like we can all see it and we'll respond accordingly. So like if we see a message or something that pops up and it's like, oh, this is very so and so specific, then we have our group text and we'll just let people know like, hey, you should probably hop in there and figure that one out. But then obviously there has been some other times when, somebody asks a very, specific question and then the most random person will answer it. And it's like,
I feel like Future, when it says like, when they have like the band list of band members and what they do, it's like, okay, this person vocals as well as Facebook, this person guitars as well as Twitter, this person drums as well as TikTok, this person bass as well as Instagram. So like you put everybody's social media role as well as their band role.
it wouldn't be a bad idea because there are definitely some of us that like me. I'm not like the biggest Twitter person, but I do work well on Instagram. I do work well, YouTube stuff, Facebook. Facebook's a little slower because it's like all older people for the most part. So it's like everybody's still just kind of
Yeah.
posting on the walls and doing all that. Twitter is very lawless. There's a lot you could say. You could say a lot.
It's not Twitter anymore. It's X.
Oh yeah, whoops, my bad. I'm so sorry. I gotta go. Actually, I gotta go buy my check mark after we get off of this interview. Shit.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. but I want to thank you so much, man, as usual. Everybody, we are here with Of Virtue. Be sure to check out Omen. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.